was it about that?
This was about in the 60s, yeah.
60s.
Yeah, we joined in 1960.
1960,
Yeah.
okay.
But we visited with our children before that. They were just about ready to enter elementary school when we decided we'd start looking, yeah.
Oh.
And the young man that we met, so nice and wonderful, and we came to the church. We found a lot of very lovely, welcoming people, and we had found some people that were a little strange, but that was okay. We all are a little strange at times.
Absolutely. So, can you just describe some of the things, major issues that were going on in the country and in this community at the time you joined?
Well, it was the height of the civil rights movement, the beginning of it, and this church was sitting in the middle of an integrated neighborhood, but wasn't really part of the neighborhood or the community. And but they were involved, I think, with the West Mount area neighbors and things like that. But I wasn't aware of any movement in the congregation to become involved in the real civil rights movement. And I guess until the denomination decided to create the Black Caucus, then that sort of gave a little impetus to thinking of black empowerment, which is what it was all about. It wasn't about socializing, and unfortunately, so many people thought it would be, oh, if I just treat you nice, but that wasn't the focus of the civil rights movement. It was black empowerment that was so important because of the lack of access to opportunities and institutions that would make it possible to function a little better in this world. And they just weren't there. And in this church there were a number of very influential people who didn't realize that they were enabling racist institutions to do what they were doing. You know, insurance companies that were redlining, mortgage companies that wouldn't lend mortgages. And yet they were members of this church who were officials and executives in those companies.
So I'm wondering, Marion, what was it like for you as you kind of got to know the church and the people in it and realized that there was this complex sort of situation?
I don't know that many of them realized it. Because there were people who would confuse me with another person of color who I looked nothing like. And I would get silly questions like, my cleaning lady left me, do you know whether I can find one? I was a stay-at-home mom. I didn't operate an employment service. So how would I know? But it was little things like that.
Yeah, I'm so curious how you would respond to those kinds of...
Well, I just respond that these people were uninformed, which was the reason I stayed with the church after after our children were grown. Actually, I could have just gone anywhere.
Yeah.
But this church was so uninformed about the black community that some of us felt that they needed us around. And because somehow they weren't aware that our community is just like anybody else's. We're not monolithic. But some people sort of thought we were. And so we stayed.
When you say we, Marion, can you tell me a little bit about who some of the other people were?
Well, for instance, when my son was ready to start applying for college, well, our kids both went to Ivy Leagues. And someone says to me, well, why should they go there? And I said, why shouldn't they? And the person gave me no answer. I mean, it was just little goofy things, you know. And as I said, I think Mary Kidd had died before you came, but there was a very prominent couple in the church, Mary and George Kidd. George was a handsome, full-headed guy, full head of hair, fit and trim. My husband was bald, out of shape. People would come and ask me how George was. My husband's name was Joe. They would ask Mary how Joe was. I mean, it was things that let me know that people really weren't looking at me as a person. What they saw was a person of color. But they weren't actually looking at me as a person. There weren't many, but there were instances like that. And it just sends a message about what the congregation was like. And maybe and we didn't seek any kind of social interaction. There were a few families that we had dinners with and maybe went to the theater with, but not many. Not many. But the church basically was, as I saw it, just wasn't too interested in what was happening in the community. They just wanted to take care of their little church. And, you know, the school was going down the tubes, but nobody worried about that. And we talk fondly of our association with Lingelbach. But for years, Lingelbach was just sliding down the tubes, and did we do anything? Except have our little tutoring service. I mean, stuff like that.
Yeah, and how have things changed, or even not changed over the years?
Well, they have changed because we do have more outreach into trying to determine what problems there might be in the community other than the immediate church community, and working on them, you know, such as the rehabbing the houses down in North Philadelphia and getting involved with CAMI, and I'm trying to think of what else we did, especially in the anti-racism committee, trying to have the congregation become more aware of the obstacles that are placed in the way of people of color just doing business or getting an education or trying to find a nice place to live. So it's sort of an educational process, I guess, that those of us of color have sort of set upon to, and the congregation's been receptive. So we're a lot more aware that outreach is needed than I think we used to be. Although back in the early part, there was one family in the church, and this young lady her family lived in Lafayette Hills, I think. And she organized some of her neighbors in her neighborhood, not the church, and they would go down to the lighthouse. It's around 2nd and Erie Avenue. The Black Panthers were operating a breakfast program for neighborhood children. And these ladies from suburban Lafayette Hills would go down to North Philadelphia every morning to serve in that breakfast program. And she was a member of the church. But I don't know that the church was actively involved in it. But there were people who were doing things like that, yeah. But the church itself just didn't seem to get its act together about the need for community involvement. Now they're doing better.
Yeah. When did that shift, do you think?
Well, it began to shift when Dave Park became the minister. I think he became the minister in the 70s, something like that. He was the minister that succeeded Max Datscom. And he began to try to steer the congregation toward a more community outreach beyond the immediate confines of the church, and also to try to get the congregation to understand some of the problems in the economic empowerment of people of color. And that was the beginning. And then the church has moved. It's sort of gone in fits and starts, but it has moved a little bit since then. It's still moving slowly, but... And
what would you say, Marion, that your role has been in kind of moving some of these changes? And you talked about educating people in sort of individual...
Well, basically, that's it, just talking to people and letting them know what's happening with people in my community, because I live in East Mount Airy. So I'm aware of what's happening, and then the other, I think we have at the time, and I don't know what our congregation is like now, residential-wise, but there were a number of people that lived in suburban communities that came to the church. Not so many in the immediate area of the church. There may be more now, I don't know. So their concerns were, my children are not affected by these terrible schools. So why should I do anything? And that hasn't changed with some of the people even today. Because about 2 years ago, I was talking with a young man who had a little daughter about 3 or 4 years old, and that's when the schools were having a terrible time here. And he said, well, that doesn't bother me, I don't live here. And that troubles me a little bit, because we're all interdependent, and whatever happens to a human being it should affect you. Maybe your child doesn't have to worry about a bad school, but there are a whole lot of children that do. And if you can do something about that, I think you should.
And that what you just said makes me think of one of the 7 principles.
Well, yes. Well, that's it. When I read those 7 principles, I guess it's just like, you go through the motions, but do you really think about what they mean and what they mean for you in relation to other people and to the rest of the world? Not just our little community that we have to preserve. And I kind of, coming from a Catholic background with so much ritual and dogma and things you have to remember that make no sense at all to me, I sort of put some of our principles in that category, because they're not things that we really live by. They're things we swear allegiance to and say we believe in. But sometimes when you're put to the test, you just don't. And for me, the schools have always been sort of I have a weak spot in my heart for them, because children shouldn't have their education decided by their zip code.
Yeah.
And in Philadelphia, that's about what it's like. So to me, I think anyone who lives here or has any interest should be doing something to help these schools get better and more accountable and whatever, and not just say, well, it doesn't bother me because I don't live there, my children don't go. And there's still a whole lot of that.
Yeah. I'm wondering, Marion, how you think you've evolved as a person during the years that you've been involved in the church and just during that period of your life.
Well, I've evolved to the point where I'm not so self-centered and concerned about me, that I really try to put as much energy and effort as I can in trying to make something better for somebody else. Whether it's children or people who are homeless or whatever, stuff like that. Yeah. It's made me much more aware and thankful for my blessings, but then it's made me realize that not everybody is as blessed as I am. And that I'm obligated to share my blessings.
And do you have some thoughts about how USG as a community can continue evolving in the direction that you've just described?
You mean our church?
Our church as
church
a
community.
whole, yeah.
I really don't know. I haven't given it too much thought, because whenever I see the adult spiritual development things,
the classes.
Well, I don't find anything there that piques my interest. But it all seems to be so centered on personal development. And I don't know, I don't get the feeling that we want to do much for anybody outside of our little church community and improving ourselves. I don't know whether that's an accurate perception. It may be quite wrong, because I don't know what people are doing outside of the church in their neighborhoods and that sort of thing. But when I look at the offerings and the things, the events in the church, it seems that it's all church-centered. And the people centered on self-improvement or preserving the church or whatever.
Individual spirituality.
Yeah, but I don't get the feeling that there's a desire to give to someone who's not part of your little church circle, and that sort of thing. Or to help make something better for somebody that you don't even know. I just don't get that feeling. Maybe wrong. It may be a misperception on my part. I just don't know.
And can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in the ERC and how that was started? Well,
my husband and I were involved in the Black Caucus back in the 60s. And that was interesting because we couldn't encourage some of the other members of color of the church the Black Caucus was set up as an economic empowerment device.
And that was within the Unitarian Church?
This was it was set up by the UUA in Boston. And they set aside $1 million, and they were going to give it to the Black Caucus in increments of $250,000 to work in black communities in various cities. And it didn't succeed as well as it should have, because the executive director, who was selected by I don't know whom, spent a whole lot of money visiting churches and flying around the country and doing PR, but not actually getting the communities involved to do something. So after the first $250,000, they rethought it and they decided that wasn't working. But when the caucus was organized, there were members of color of this church who would not join.
Who would not join?
Because they only wanted to deal with an integrated group. Black Caucus was black folks. But they only wanted to deal with things that had integrated people, so they wouldn't do it. But restoration was very heavily involved, but we weren't so much.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
Yes.
What do you think accounts for the difference that there was more
Well,
in restoration?
it was a personal choice on the part of the people of color. Some even resented using the term black. Some resented the fact that we were not, at that point, we were organizing ourselves to find out what the black community could use and whatever, so we really didn't need to have white involvement at that point. And they didn't see the sense in that. They felt that everything should be done on an integrated basis, and we disagreed. But I can attribute that to some of the members. Well, I think we all came from different backgrounds and different experiences. And my husband and I had experienced a whole lot of discrimination, repression, anything you want to call it. But some people had not. So they didn't have the same feelings that we had about the need for access and connections. And in order to get things done, you had to have access to the people, the institutions, and many times you couldn't because, well, for instance, if you were a business person doing business down Center City, there were a number at that time of luncheon clubs, and that's where business was done. So if you were a businessman of color, you couldn't join those luncheon clubs. Therefore, you couldn't have a seat at the table, so to speak. But it was hard for us to get some people who'd never had that kind of experience to understand that's what we thought was needed. They didn't quite understand why that was necessary. They were more involved in social integration, people treating them nicely and being able to go to the restaurants and whatever. But I didn't care if I if I ate in a restaurant that was operated by purple people, I just wanted to be able to choose to go there. But I needed to have the means to go there. That was the thing that was being denied. Mm-hmm. We had no access to the institutions that would allow us to progress up the economic ladder. And I didn't care about who sat next to me. But I wanted to be able to make business decisions, educational decisions like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And that was being denied. Mm-hmm. Very subtly, but it was being denied. And it was something that most people failed to see or didn't want to see. So it was a little... My husband and I didn't mind. It wasn't difficult for us, but it just made it a little more intense for us. For instance, there was a time when the Board of Trustees did not have a person of color on it. And we suggested that since they were in the middle of an integrated neighborhood, and they were trying to be an integrated church, didn't they think they needed a little coloring on the Board of Trustees? Mm-hmm. Well, not really. And one dear lady says to me, well, why can't I represent your view on the Board of Trustees? I asked her, had she ever lived black? Because she was a white lady, lived in the suburbs. I'm a black person living in the city. There are a whole lot of things that you and I are going to differ on that might come up at a Board of Trustees meeting. I don't know. But I have certain views on privileges and whatever that wouldn't jibe with hers at all. Mm-hmm. But she thought that there was no reason why she couldn't be just as representative of me as a person of color on the Board of Trustees. And it was a fight to get the first person on that Board of Trustees. Mm-hmm. But we did.
I don't know. When did that happen? How long did it take?
I don't remember. It happened somewhere in the 60s, mm-hmm. and the gentleman who was the first member of color on the Board of Trustees was Eversley Vaughn. And Eversley was a social worker, and that's the other thing. Eversley was not well groomed and didn't care to be. He had missing teeth, but he had a college degree. He was an accredited social worker and a very civil rights activist. And there were people in this church at that time that didn't even want to talk with Eversley because of the way he looked. Eversley was very active, and he worked in community organizations with the Westmount area and Acorn and groups like that. But like I said, he was not very interested in grooming. But he was sort of marginalized because of the way he looked. Mm-hmm. And that happened sometimes in the annual meetings, depending on what the person looked like. They would be eye-rolling and that sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, it was quite subtle, but it was there. And I don't think the people that were doing it were aware of what it said about them. It was just the way they were. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that happens so much now anymore in meetings. But
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering, was the Black Caucus kind of the precursor of the ERC? Hmm? Was the Black Caucus kind of a precursor to the ERC? Or
not really. The ERC sort of sprang up in the church, and I don't even know how. Uh-huh. Because there were people that did awareness work, like Fran Emery having skits and whatever. Uh-huh. And I think that, and then there was the coffee and conversation that Betty Hankins had. Mm-hmm. And I think they all kind of were going toward making the church more aware of the racial needs. Mm-hmm. And eventually, somewhere along the line, the ERC came up. Yeah. I don't really recall how it evolved, mm-hmm. but it just did. Mm-hmm. And it evolved over a time over several people, because this has been the longest that it has been quite active that I know of. Because we had it for a while, and then it would sort of peter out, and then it would come back and peter out, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the most active that we've had, and the longest that we've had of an ending racing committee working. And even there, we've had some pushback, I believe, because of the name. Some people don't want to join a committee that says ending racism. And there were thoughts that maybe we should change the name. But then we realized that our work wasn't going to change. And if someone was concerned about the name, they probably weren't concerned about the work we were doing. So we just leave it alone. And kept it like it is, yes. But it hasn't grown too much. It's beginning to grow a little more the past couple of years, but it's been a struggle to have members serve on it. And but people are busy, maybe. They have other things they have to do.
And how has it been for you being involved with the ERC? Is that something that, I'm just curious what your experience has been like?
Well, some of the things they've been involved in, I've been quite interested in, yes, and particularly when they got involved in the mass incarceration, because the community of color has been brutalized by police for years, and people would think we were just paranoid. We saw race and color under everything, and people that did not have the same experience with policemen, or didn't have their children harassed by policemen, couldn't understand. For instance, when our son got his driving license at 16 or 17, we had to instruct him how to survive a police stop. Now, white folks don't have to do that. And when you tell somebody that, they say, oh, no, that's not, policemen aren't like that. But yes, they are. And he was stopped one Saturday night within about 4 blocks of our home because he was driving the family car. My husband liked nice cars. And this 16-year-old was driving the family car, pulled over for no reason. And then the policeman just asked to see the registration and said, okay, you can go on. But he wasn't doing anything. So we in the black community say it's driving while black, you have a problem. But if I say that to white people who don't live in Philadelphia, they don't have that problem with their children. They say, that Marion Watlington is paranoid, you know. But, you know, these things happen.
Do you think that there is more awareness now?
Some, and then there's still some people who believe that if you are stopped by the policeman, you must have done something wrong. They will not give you the benefit of the doubt. They'll give the policeman the benefit of the doubt. And I think it just depends on what your experience has been with policemen. Ours has been pretty negative. Even adults have to be careful. But our teenagers, and especially our young men, are stopped, whatever. They can be walking in the wrong neighborhood and just be stopped because they're out of place. And it still happens. Yeah. And it's not just here. There, when I was working, I worked in Fishtown, Lower Kensington. And there were streets there that if I had had a flat tire, I would have driven on my rims to get out of there because I would not have been safe there. And that I just retired in 2000. So this wasn't back in the 50s or 60s. Yeah. But there's that kind of animus toward people of color, and still is in some places. And unfortunately, we can't seem to get past it. We work hard at it, but it doesn't seem to be working so good. And I'm not sure that people who are not affected by it are truly aware until somebody writes a book about it, or, you know, something erupts like Ferguson or something like that. But it goes on all the time in the black community.
And I'm just wondering if there are things you'd like to add about either your experience at USG and beyond, or
Not
thoughts?
really. As I said, I haven't been that actively involved in the church because I didn't come to the church looking for some kind of social activity, or I just came because our kids needed a church school. And we made some friends along the way, but basically the church was not a major pillar in my life. Not really. Even now. I come sometimes on Sundays, sometimes I look at what's being presented and I decide I don't need that today. And I stay home or go somewhere else. But I have, as I told you, I have no sense of where the church might go or should go because I haven't been that involved. But the one thing that gives me concern is that every once in a while I hear the church trying to find a way to appeal to people of color to join their church. And I find that offensive because I feel that the church should do whatever it wants to do, whatever programs it has, and if people want to join them, fine. But don't go on the offensive trying to manipulate me to come and join your church. So I get a little annoyed at that every once in a while. But every once in a while it comes up. I think it comes up in meetings sometimes. What can we do to encourage more people of color to join our church? And I want to say, forget about it. Just do your job and see what happens. Have your programs, do what you believe in, exercise your principles, and then see who wants to join you. But don't make an all-out effort to try to just get me to join you.
It sounds like that really gets your goat.
It does, yes. Yes, it does. Because there again, you're treating me differently. They didn't have an offensive to try to get you to join the church. So why should they have one for me to join the church? So it sort of speaks to the mindset of many Americans. And it's something that they're unaware of. And as President Obama says, it's a stain that people don't even know is there. And it's something we just have to work on. But how long it will take us, I have no idea. Because in order to think that you have to do something special to have me join you, says that you don't really think, you think I'm so different that somehow this is necessary. So there we are.
Well, Marion, thank you so much.
Well, I don't know.
Appreciate this conversation.
I don't know whether you need to thank me, but as I said, I felt that with the church in the middle of an integrated neighborhood, it really should know the community and be willing to serve that community and not just the congregation. And we'll see how we go, where we go. Hopefully we're beginning to understand that's what we need to do. But who knows?
When you're not coming here on a Sunday morning, where else do you go?
Oh, well, I might decide that I want to hear gospel music and I might go to a Baptist church. I don't agree with their philosophy. I could never join them, but I do enjoy the music. So sometimes I'll do that. Other times maybe I'll just, when my husband's alive, we just take a walk down Valley Green or something like that and commune with nature. But I haven't found, the attractiveness of the church for me is that I don't have to swear allegiance to things I don't believe in. And I can still be welcomed as a member. And that's important. I don't have to, as the Baptists say, take the Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. In order to join their church, I would have to do this, you see, and accept a lot of their ritual and doctrine. And Luckily, our church doesn't require that, although we're getting a few more rituals than I care to have. But,
What are those?
well, the idea, in Catholic Church, we lit candles for people's intentions and whatever. I never saw the need for that. I figured that I can communicate my intentions to God. I can communicate with Him. So I didn't like that when I was Catholic. So now first we had candles here in the church. Now we've got stones. It's the symbolism that I don't need, but some people do. Some people enjoy it, and I think they should have the right to have it if they enjoy it. I don't have to participate. So I usually come late after all the symbolism has gone. The ringing of the bell, the lighting of the chalice, the joys and sorrows. So I usually come after all that's done. But if some people feel the need for it, that's fine. They should have it. Yeah. But I don't have to have it. And since it's not required participation, I don't come. And that's the beauty of having a denomination like this. So there's a need for this church, just as it is, even if it's not involved in the community. It's a place where people can come and freely exercise the principles and things they believe in without fear of, well, I would have no fear, some people would, but without being made uncomfortable because of what they think or say. And I think that's great. Yeah.
Was that part of why you chose this church to bring your children to?
Yes. Yeah. Because my husband's Baptist experience, of course, the only road to heaven, so to speak, and I don't know about that, was through the Baptist church. And the Catholics, they were even worse, because you weren't even supposed to associate with someone who was not a Catholic, because they just weren't worth associating with. And you can imagine the effect this has on a 10-year-old black kid who they wouldn't let come to their schools in their neighborhood, because they didn't want any black children in their neighborhood schools.
In the Catholic schools?
At the time that I was in elementary school, there were 3 schools in the city that would accept black students. One was in South Philadelphia, one was in North Philadelphia, one was in West Philadelphia. And all the other parish schools would decline to have you enrolled in their schools. I went through public school.
In Philadelphia?
In Philadelphia. And when I would go to confession, and the priest would ask where I lived, and what school I went to, and I would tell him, he'd say, "Oh, that's not a Catholic school. Where do you live?" And I would tell him where I lived. "Oh, he's going to come and see my mother, because my mother knows better than that. It's a mortal sin not to send you to the Catholic school." And it's just a whole rigmarole. Once he got my address, nobody ever showed up to talk to my mother about me coming to their school. So my mother decided to check it out herself. And we were in North Philadelphia, and we were between St. Elizabeth's Parish and Our Lady of Mercy at Broad and Susquehanna, right in between. And each parish said, "No, you're not in our jurisdiction. You belong to that church." And each, that's the church, so there was no place for us to go. But there was a school at Broad and Fairmount that would accept this. It was this school that was, I'm not sure if Mother Catherine Drexel founded the order that operated that school or not. I think it was. But I could go there. Now, I lived like 20th and Diamond in 10, 11 years old. And I'm supposed to get from 20th and Diamond down to Broad and Fairmount for school walking. And no lunchroom, so what am I going to do? But that was it, yeah. So I was really ready to leave there. By the time I got to high school, my sister and I decided we would no longer take the sacraments. We would attend the church with my mother, because she was still a devout Catholic, and she's buried in a Catholic cemetery. But we figured we couldn't deal with that anymore. So this church is a lot different than that, a lot better. But we'll see what happens from the rest of it. Do you have any more questions of me? Ask whatever you like.
I don't think so. I mean, those are the ones that I had, but
You have one you'd like to ask that isn't there? It's okay to ask.
I'm just trying to formulate it in my head. I can't quite get it. Sorry.
Wow.
Having listened to a lot of these interviews, my conflict is, you say don't cater your appeal to me.
Right.
On the other hand, if the church is insular, it's got to start thinking in other ways of what can I do to be more open.
However they go about it, but just don't tailor it to just me as a person of color. You might want to be more open to helping Philadelphia solve its problems. I don't know. You might be more open to working with housing. I don't know. But just don't tailor it to me as a person of color.
Because it's going to be, it's not just black people, it's going to be Hispanics, Indians.
It could be, yeah.
It's going to be anybody who's,
Yeah.
And then the other conflict is that the Unitarian concept, it doesn't appeal, I was just saying to Marietta, it doesn't appeal to the traditional Baptist.
Exactly. So no matter what you say or do to them, you wouldn't attract. And as a matter of fact, there were some people of color that joined when we joined, and after a while went back to their other churches. One lady went back to her Episcopalian church, another one went back to her Baptist church, and a couple of them went I don't know where. Mm-hmm. But like you say, some things are just never going to appeal to everybody, whether it's a person of color or Latino or Irish Catholic or whatever.
Then there's the flip side that you don't necessarily have to be a member of that church and go to its services to be involved with the congregation. So
exactly, yeah. So, like you say, it's kind of a conflict, and I can understand the dilemma for the church, trying to decide what direction they're going to go and how they're going to go, because you've got all these different views out there and different reasons why people become members of a religious community. Because some people don't just join to come to the church, they want the social aspect, or they want the community outreach, or they want the music, or all kinds of reasons, yeah. Maybe you have a good athletic program, who knows, Might have a good baseball team.
And many points of entry.
Yeah, many points of entry, and so trying to figure out how to attract people to your church, you just have to do what you think is a good program for you and see what happens. It might work, it might not. Because people, I think, are becoming feel the need less for some kind of organized religion in their lives anyhow. Mm-hmm. They're not making it up as they go along, but they're sort of putting many different things together to come to what works for them, which is interesting.
Yeah, I read an article about the percentages of young people who haven't experienced any religion growing up is growing. Like in some countries that are supposedly Catholic countries, they take the parts that they want from the Catholic Church and practice them, and others they just forget about, especially in Latin countries. Some parts of the Catholic doctrine and all they just don't even pay attention to. So, and as you say, young people seem to have more to do with their time than come to church. I don't know what they're doing. They're doing other things on Sunday morning or whatever. Although many of them are involved, I think, in other organizations doing community good and stuff, and they don't feel the need for doing it through the church, possibly. Because maybe the churches aren't doing as much as the young people think they ought to. I don't know. But it's a dilemma, especially for the churches. Jeff, since you've seen a number of interviews, is there anything else that we want to be talking about?
No, I think we've covered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure very animated.
Probably covered a whole lot of stuff that you're going to edit out that you don't need. But it's been an interesting association for me, and there are times when I look and I decide, oh no, I can't be bothered with those folks. They're doing crazy things again. Like, you know, the 2 Sunday services and that and whatever. But I feel that there are people that have needs that have to be met, and mine are not the only ones. So we have to do, if they have to have, if some people feel the need for whatever, I think that their needs need to be considered, whatever they are. They may not be mine, and that's okay.
Yeah, I thought if they want to have a 9:15 service in the morning, it's okay with me.
Yeah, just don't ask me to
Don't
come
ask
because
me
I'm
to
not
come,
coming
right?
at 9:15, right? Yeah.
Don't ask me to video record it, for example. I said, don't ask me, I come to the Sunday services and I video record them
well, you're
myself.
recording
Well,
everything,
just
yeah.
don't ask me to come at 9:15
Yeah,
to video record
that's
it.
it. But if some people like 9:15,
And then they had Mark Morris and Reed come here, and you know, they said, oh well, he's a prominent, you know, African American Universalist minister. We really want to get him on, you know, we really want to have him. So I said, okay.
yeah. And so you came.
Yeah, I came for that. That was one of the only 9:15
Yeah,
services
right.
I've ever
He
been
was
to.
okay, but you know, I'm not a fan of Mark Morris and Reed. Because I've forgotten which book I read. One of his books he read about his growing up. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with this man? Didn't he know he's a black person? What do you expect? And he was so outdone when he ran into some of the same things we'd run into. Because he was biracial. But he doesn't look white, so he's not going to be treated white, biracial or not.
You mean he seemed more surprised by his
Surprised
experience than...
by his experiences, by being, well, I think he was going to a school in Switzerland or something, and he may have been called black there or something like that, you know. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with him? Now, how come he didn't know this was going to happen? You know, where is he? So that's why when I read his writings, he's an intelligent man. He says, but I figured this guy, he didn't grow up with reality, you know. I mean, he's a black person in white America or in a white world. And the experiences of a black person in a white world are not the same as white folks. They're not going to be. And it goes back to the founding of the country. And it hasn't gotten any better. It's like the song from South Pacific. You have to be carefully taught to hate. Well, we've been carefully taught to hate for generations. It's going to take a long time to get over that. There are people that pop up that don't buy it and do wonderful, but basically as a country, we've been taught to hate anything that's different, and guess who's different? Anybody that doesn't look white. So it's just crazy, but that's the way we are. And I don't know what we're going to do about it except implode and start all over again. Because there's just, some people just won't let go. And we find out about it every day when we read the newspapers and things that pop up. They're just people that won't let go.
Are you planning to come to hear Ellie Sears talk this weekend?
What?
I'm curious what Ellie Sears is going to have to say this weekend. She's
Oh,
talking.
yes, I plan to come Sunday, yeah.
I'm looking forward
Because
to that.
for her, her experience is even a whole lot different than mine, and her children's experiences will be different from hers. And, you know, how she manages that world that she and her children live in. Because when her children are not with her, and they're out on their own, they're going to be treated one way. When they're with her, in her world, they'll be treated another way. And then you've got a conflict within the kids. And I thought of that when I would read about people adopting children, especially white folks adopting black children. It presents quite a challenge for them to have the children to be able to comfortably move in both worlds. Because those children will be treated totally different if they're on a train by themselves than if they're on the train with their white mother or the white parent and something happens or whatever. It's just the way America is.
As kids grow older, they spend more and more time without their parents.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to see how my family life goes, because my son went to Cheney University, so he was one of the only
So we know
white kids.
he was there at an old black university, predominantly black university.
But the real consequence of his going there was that he ended up marrying an African woman from Morgan State University, who he met in New York at the Thurgood B. Marshall Conference of traditionally black universities.
Mm-hmm.
He was the Cheney representative.
So she's from Africa,
So
and
she's
he's
from Africa, and her mother's Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
So first we thought he was going to have to convert to being a Muslim, which
Right.
didn't happen. But now we've got 4 grandchildren, and it's going to be interesting to see how they
thread that needle, huh?
Yeah, how they fit into, like my son could be said to have white privilege. Actually, their mother could be said to have white privilege in a way, because she's entered into corporate America as much as any other,
but
white person.
there's some people that will still look at her color, and privilege won't be there.
Yeah, so but I'm just saying, there's all this mix. She's definitely into the corporate.
She's
America.
moving in the white world as a black person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And African at that.
Yeah,
Not
which is another thing, because the Africans don't want to be viewed as African Americans or
Right.
Black Americans, because they think they're a whole lot better than we are. So we're down here, they're up here a little bit. So they don't want to be associated with the Black Americans. But then with white America, depending on where you are, they just look and all they see is a person of color. They see a black person. They don't care. They don't care if you came from Africa or you came from South Philadelphia. You're just black. And they react to you and treat you in whatever fashion. But you've got an interesting family to even watch.
Well, I'm just raising them. My son and his wife have been in either education or corporate America from the time they graduated from college.
Mm-hmm.
So her mother came over from Ivory Coast to raise their baby.
Oh, is her mother still here?
Her mother's going for citizenship.
Okay.
Yeah, her mother's taking care of their kids. They have a 7-year-old. So when they got pregnant before they got married, from the time that she had the baby,
Her mother was here. Lucky for her,
so that she could work.
Mm-hmm.
Then my daughter-in-law's sister came over.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got a household.
Extended family.
They've got a household, and
Yeah.
so we're having to deal with even the raising of the kids. It's different, and just the way the mothers culturally,
There's a whole different culture about child
We would spend
rearing.
more time with the kids doing family dinners.
Uh-huh.
But that's not how they're doing it.
No,
so
they have a totally different culture of child rearing, yes.
Now,
And-
do you see a lot of them? Do they live nearby?
Yeah, they're just on Walnut Lane.
Also,
Right here in
they're close by.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like you say, it's the wife's family is a totally different culture than her husband's family. And she and her husband have their own little culture, but their families have the culture that they came up with. And the African culture is pretty strong and a little
French.
different on child rearing, yeah.
And they speak French, so my son doesn't speak a word of French.
Are your kids growing up bilingual?
Actually trilingual, because they didn't go to Lingelbach, which they could have gone to. They ended up going to the Independence Charter School downtown.
Oh, the Spanish English.
So
yeah.
Instead of going to
Spanish.
Lingelbach. Well, Lingelbach wasn't such a good school, is that why they didn't go?
They got admitted to the Independence Charter School, so it was hard to turn it down.
Mm-hmm.
If they had been turned down, the children probably would have gone to Lingelbach,
Mm-hmm.
because they couldn't afford to send them to a private school. But
Mm-hmm.
they won the lottery, so they have carpooling 3 times a week
Yeah,
to
well,
get
you
down
know,
there and
see,
back.
that goes back to years ago when I realized that the people in this church were sending their children to private schools instead of digging in and sending them and helping the public schools to get better. And then the public schools wouldn't have been in the mess they're in if those people who had influence and good ideas and resources had sent their children and made those schools better for the other children as well. But no, they went to private schools. And I had a beef with that. We could have sent our friends thought we were crazy for sending our kids to public schools. But we figured that we would make up whatever the lack was, and if they weren't, whatever they were not getting in public school, we'd make sure they did okay. The trips, our children went to Lingelbach. And then they went to Houston for middle school instead of Roosevelt, which is a horrible school. And then from there they went to Girls High and Central. And our friends said we were making such a mistake because their friends were all going to Germantown Friends, William Penn Charter, and there was a girls' school, and there was another Green Street Friends or something there. So our friends thought we were just nuts. Because we were damaging our children's future because of our goofy commitment to public education. But we didn't see it that way. We felt that we could make a difference in the school, and some of the parents there didn't have the time and all to do it, so we could. And at that time, it was a good school. We worked on it. But
well, Lingelbach is still a decent school.
it's still pretty good. I volunteer there.
Are you still volunteering there? I've been there the last 2 years.
Well, I just started volunteering there after I left the corrective reading program at the school district because I just like working with kids. But I was there. I just finished in June volunteering in the kindergarten. No, first grade. And but actually, I wasn't a tutor because I don't like tutoring. What I like to do is to provide an extra pair of hands in the classroom for the teacher, and she can just tell me what she needs done. And that way, I feel that I can help more children and free her up to do whatever she needs to do. And the tutoring doesn't really do that. But unfortunately, they've had 3 different principals in 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to happen in September, and I don't even know if I'll get back there. Because the lady, Miss Gwartnick, was there.
Yeah.
She retired.
Right.
And I understand that she retired because she and the principal couldn't see eye to eye. The new principal that came last September, Miss Gwartnick couldn't do her job there with him, so she just retired. And that was her major loss.